rhythms of both expressing both the alkaline side of who we are and also the acidic aspect of our biochemistry as well.
Only now is mainstream medicine beginning to broaden their view of what can constitute effective cancer therapy by researching and investigating what they call, the term used is targeted therapies, targeted drugs, which are drugs that really stand the chance of being more effective and vastly less toxic. But this is so late in the game, and the amount of money that's been wasted and that is still being wasted on chemotherapy research that really is not advancing the cause very in any really significant way is really the problem we face. And until funding is shifted from conventional chemotherapy and radiation to a profound commitment to these targeted therapies, which are less toxic drugs that are not poisonous the way chemo is, that are not toxic the way chemo is, that have some side effects, but that are much more specific to the molecular and genetic abnormalities of cancer cells, and therefore potentially much more effective. If the funding were put there and on the vast potential of natural therapies, which actually work very similarly to these targeted drugs in actually pinpointing the molecular and genetic abnormalities in cancer cells and attacking cancer at its most vulnerable point, rather than flooding the whole system with toxic substances. If the emphasis were shifted there in the realm of cancer treatment specifically, there would be such a better outcome for society, for the cancer patients, and for the system.
There is a thing called insulin potentiating therapy, in which we use sugar with insulin. Now, insulin drives sugar, glucose, into cells, and we sandwich that with chemotherapy, low doses, with selected patients that have a very aggressive cancer, and they're at the point that if you don't try to fight it, it will overcome them. So we use what's called insulin potentiating therapy, where we give the sugar, the insulin, with the chemo, on the solid premise that cancers love glucose to thrive. So if a PET scan picks up a cancer via its avidity towards sugar, by giving sugar and insulin and the chemo, it would target the cancer selectively. Therefore, you would use less chemo, therefore not hurting the patient with the side effects, and targeting selectively the cancer cells. And we've been getting good results with that method.
So my late father, Dr. Mirko Beljanski, was a biologist at the Pasteur Institute in Paris. And in the 60s, 70s, even 80s, everybody believed that mutation at the level of the DNA were the sole cause of cancer. And he had the idea to look how environmental toxins do affect our DNA. And he was able to measure the destabilization of the DNA induced by environmental toxins, and that destabilized DNA would replicate much faster than healthy DNA.
So Dr. Beljanski developed this test called the OncoTest, which was capable of determining whether a substance was carcinogenic. He would take cancerous DNA and put it in solution, and then he would add this substance, and he was able to determine whether or not there was increased replication of the DNA by measuring the absorbance in a special spectrophotometer. And he found out that substances which are capable of intercalating themselves between the DNA were actually turned out to be very carcinogenic substances, and substances that didn't do that would not make the DNA unstable. So he found he was able to do this test. Of course, this test has not been used commercially because I think to a great extent conventional industry doesn't really want to know whether something is carcinogenic or not, because it would mean changing things and removing many things from the market. But in any event, he had the test.
Then he came up with molecules, natural molecules, that would selectively prevent this destabilized DNA to duplicate. And he came up with natural extracts, such as Pao Pereira extracts, for example, or Revolfia vomitoria extracts, that are able to selectively recognize those this DNA in the cancer cells and stop the replication of those cells. After my father passed away, we had the opportunity to work with Columbia University, with the Department of Holistic Urology at Columbia University, which is run by Dr. Aaron Katz. And they suggested to do some research with those extracts and to find the mechanism of action. And the Department of Holistic Urology of Dr. Katz confirmed that, for example, the Paupera extract is able to induce apoptosis of cancer cells, and that the Revolvia vomitoria extracts is able to inhibit the replication cycle of cancer cells. So that there is a mechanism of action which has been explained, and that's how, for example, 2 of those extracts can be of benefit to help people who have immune deficiencies that can lead to cancer. So in a way, my father was able to offer a scientific model, scientific explanation for environmental medicine. And my idea based on that is, why wait for environmental toxins to destabilize our DNA? Shouldn't we start by detoxifying our bodies before waiting for a destabilization at the level of the core of our cells?
He developed these supplements that were used in France and in Belgium primarily by cancer patients. Along with conventional, or after they had conventional treatment, they would use these products, and found that there was an improved survival with no side effects. And also they tended to reduce the side effects from the conventional treatments.
The most famous person that my father was able to help was actually former French president of the Republic, François Mitterrand. And at that time, the official doctor of the French White House has declared that the president was going only to survive for only a few months, and that the country should be ready for early elections. And against all odds, the president started to get better and better. There was no need for early elections, and Mitterrand was able to end his second term. But after Mitterrand finally passed away, all the people who had been very infuriated with the process against my father turned against him, and my father was indicted by a French judge. His laboratory was raided. Most of his papers and research were seized and destroyed. And my mother also was indicted. They were both put on the house of arrest. I was told that I should not go back to Paris, even myself, even though I had nothing to do with that. I could be arrested also at the customs. And my father never got a date for a trial. Never. They had really nothing against him, but what they wanted to do is to prevent him to continue his research, to publish, and they let him really destroy himself of despair of not having a lab, because he was really living for his research. When I understood that my father was dying, I made the trip to Paris, even though, I had been told that there was a risk. And I went to his deathbed, and I made him 2 promises. One, to continue his research, his work, and the other one, to take the case to the European Court of Human Rights. And I'm pleased to report that we have won the case.
So Dr. Beljanski's products are available as nutritional supplements, and I try to use them in a lot of cancer patients, sometimes along with conventional treatment or after conventional treatment, and sometimes as a substitute. And again, we, of course, need much more research and much more studies on these subjects, but the problem is that all of the money is going into using these non-natural substances that are need to be tweaked so that their chemical structure is different from natural substance so they can be patented. Then if they're patented, that's where the big money is. And that's what prevents, in my opinion, the ongoing beneficial research to help cancer patients, because natural substances are not being researched sufficiently.
We often think that disturbances in our bodies, different symptoms or illnesses, are something that just happens independent of our minds. Almost like it's a separate thing. You know, you hear people using language like, my back is killing me, or my stomach is killing me, you know, that sort of thing, as if it's a separate entity that has a will of its own that's doing something to me. We fail in our worldview, and it permeates allopathic medicine, and even a lot of complementary medicine, is that the mind is not really considered here, as if it's somehow a separate entity. But it's totally impossible that it be separate. Mind-body is really just one word, and you cannot have one without the other because it's all interwoven. And we need to get past this hallucination. It's really like mass hallucination that we're all living in, that is a separate kind of entity. Every cell has its own receptors, and those receptors are picking up communication from the environment. And so, yes, they respond to the physical environment, the chemicals around us, and that sort of thing, but they respond 100 times more to what we think, to consciousness, to input that comes that way. So when we think about, we take a medicine, or we take an herb, or we just take even natural foods, yes, they all have effects. But if you think about multiplying that by 100 times over, that is phenomenal. And that's why our thoughts affect every aspect of our bodies and affect our cells, make them happy cells, sad cells, disturbed cells, anxious cells, frightened cells. And if those continue over a period of time, what's it going to do to us? It's going to totally weaken our immune system. Because it's not just whether I've eaten properly, it's not just whether I've taken vitamins and nutrients I need, but it's also what I've been thinking and what kind of stress level I've been entertaining. I mean, we know from the New England Journal of Medicine, over 80% of the symptoms that people take to their doctors are, they call stress-related. That tells us our thoughts are involved. Our belief systems are involved. The traumas that we've had in our lives are involved. There's no such thing as an idle thought having no effects. Every single thought is having some kind of an effect on my mood and on my body and my cells. That's why there are sometimes things called spontaneous healing. The doctor calls it spontaneous because he doesn't know. But probably the guy just suddenly changed his mind about something and let go of a guilt. Or he decided, I'm going to make the most of my life. This is a wake-up call. I've been working too hard. I'm going to leave time for some play. You know, or no, I spent all my time working. I need love in my life. Or, gee, I've been carrying around grudges all my life. It's time for me to be compassionate and understand where the people are. All those things boost our immune system and help to keep us healthy. Now, we know a lot of studies show we might have as many as 74,000 thoughts a day, and that 95% of those are repeated day after day. Well, if we do a careful analysis of those, we'll find that a huge percentage of those are probably negative. So it behooves me to do whatever I can to get on top of that. So one nice little exercise one can do is to take a little index card and carry it around with the stub of a pencil for a day or two. And every time you can, when you're in a position where you can do it, that you're aware that you had a negative thought that disturbed your peace, just place a little check on that card and say to yourself, there's one of those disturbing ego thoughts. You don't have to do any more than that. Just doing that and taking a deep breath as you do it, you're beginning to break into the cycle and allowing yourself some awareness. Now, for example, I've had people come in and who've been pretty deeply depressed, and I'll have them just do this exercise. And I've seen people move out of deep depression into feeling relatively happy in about 10 weeks or 14 days, just because they changed those thoughts. Because as they change the thoughts, they change the brain chemistry. They change the brain chemistry, which is a serotonin norepinephrine balance. Now, this is what's called the placebo effect. And the placebo effect has been discounted by the medical profession and the drug companies as something to be discarded. Instead, that is the most powerful healing force in the universe. That's the part we need to harness, and it's totally free, does not have a single side effect, and it has only positive benefits. So we can begin to train ourselves with natural supplements to begin to use our minds to enhance that. For example, if I Someone just came to me this week who has cancer and is pretty serious, and the treatment's been recommended are chemotherapy and radiation. Of course, we know how harmful they are and their side effects. The idea is to try to kill cancer cells before you kill the patient. Well, I can't tell her not to do it, and she didn't, but I said, what I can do, since you've decided to go this route, how about let's see if we can enhance the effectiveness of that, and only that, and to tell your body exactly what to do with that other radiation and with that chemotherapy, which is a poison that goes in there, and tell it that the rest of your body will not take that in, that you won't be harmed. And what I've seen from this kind of approach is I've seen people have far less side effects than they normally would get, and they seem to get well faster, and the doctors are amazed at the progress they make in the shrinkage of their tumors. Now, what they've done is they've harnessed the placebo effect. They've harnessed the power of their minds. And when they harness the power of their minds, they can begin to see, okay, I wasn't ready to do it totally with my mind, but maybe I can do it with having this ritual. And I think of my taking my supplements as my ritual to focus my consciousness so I can use the power of my mind. So I buy the cheapest vitamins I can get because I'm using the ritual, and I know the placebo effect is going to give the real power to it. I used to buy the most expensive ones, but I trust my mind a little bit more now. Next year, I'm going to trust it still more. Next year, I might just imagine myself taking them and them having the effect. Because our conscious minds literally communicate to cells 100 times more powerfully than the chemical or physical environment. Why not use it?
You are alone as far as protection from cancer from our society. Unfortunately, there isn't anyone trying to promote alternative, out-of-the-box therapies, treatments, preventions of cancers. It really doesn't exist in our society. So you have to be your own advocate in preventing cancers and disease. Some practitioners do not know any of the things that were mentioned here tonight. Some are opening their minds slightly to it. However, that's the minority. So it's a new world, and you have to go to a practitioner that is open-minded, that is into this, all the things that we've talked about, so that you can have an advocate behind you that is versed in this and help you get the appropriate blood test and put you on the right road to health and prevention and treatment if you have a cancer. You want to utilize all things that we have talked about that you can utilize to help prevent and treat cancer.
I was diagnosed with colon cancer about 2 years ago. I was technically stage 4 cancer. I had metastatic cancer. I had my lymph nodes were affected. My liver had lesions in it. And that was like in February. I think that the most important thing that I've discovered is because I've eaten well for years and I've exercised, I've done yoga. I always thought I was doing the right things, and then I thought to myself, well, why do I get cancer? And you know, none of my other friends who aren't eating as well, aren't taking care of themselves as well, they don't. So I came to conclude that it was probably because I always had stressful jobs. So I started this intensive nutritional protocol probably about 4 days before I started chemo, within days. And it's not to say that I haven't always eaten well, but this was intensive. This protocol was specifically meant to support chemotherapy, to help the chemotherapy work better, to make sure I didn't have side effects, and to also build up my immune system so that I could withstand the chemotherapy. Because most people lose weight, get sicker, they don't get better when they're on chemo. I mean, ideally that's what should happen, but that's not what happens. Within days I felt great, and then I started the chemo, and I'd say for the first month or so I was kind of feeling not so good because of the side effects. But my naturopath said, you know, just keep taking, you know, stick to the protocol, it will catch up with the chemo and eventually surpass it so that you can stay ahead of it. And I would say probably February, March, At the end of March, I started to feel better. Not only did I feel better, I mean, I didn't have side effects. I mean, the nurses said, you know, we're giving you a poison. This is going to, the effects of chemo are cumulative, so that you end up, the effects should get worse as I go on. I've been doing chemo for 6 months, and I feel better now than I have in years. They just put up their hands and say, I can't believe it. I mean, they had written me off as dead, quite frankly. I mean, I had a tumor the size of a grapefruit in my abdomen, which is probably the size of a large prune now after 3 months. And now I'm stage 1. I'm stage 1. There's no activity in my lymph nodes. Everything's gone in the liver. And, you know, people say, oh, it's astounding. It's a miracle. It's not. I did the right things. I think that a lot of people don't, what they do is they don't incorporate everything. They don't do integrative medicine. People wait till they're really, really sick after they've been ravaged by chemo and radiation before they go to a naturopath. And what can he do then? He or she can do. They can try their best, but you still have a better chance of living at that point if you try naturopathic remedies. When I was diagnosed with cancer, I didn't panic. I wasn't fearful. I was confident in that I could conquer this health challenge, but I didn't do it just with food. I've done it with spiritual healers. My friends have prayed for me. I've eaten super nutritious diet. I've incorporated IV drips and ozone therapy, anything and everything that I can, what I would call integrative therapy.